Hey there, cats and kitties. I'm Bluesman at sXeblues, and this is Friday Night Rocks. For this particular episode, I wanted to do something a little special. I wanted to go ahead and, take a trip down memory lane for the music of Final Fantasy, a game series that has always been one of my favorites. Primarily, the main composer has always been Nobuo Uematsu, I believe is how it's pronounced. And this is just going to be looking at a lot of songs from the games that I have played. So I'm going to start us off with this 21 for the week, which is a whopping number, I know, but with one of the first songs that comes to mind from Final Fantasy VII, and that is Still More Fighting, which is essentially a boss battle theme, and very rocking, very kind of, seems to almost have a, guitar riffy feel to it, and very action-oriented, and just one of my favorite themes that comes from Final Fantasy VII. Following that, we'll have Rufus's welcoming ceremony. If I remember correctly, this is a scene in the game where, through a complex, bunch of button presses, you as the protagonist, Cloud Strife, have to sort of get in disguise as one of the Shinra soldiers or guards or something like that, as the, leader of the company, Rufus, or whoever it is, comes back and, you have to be able to do certain salutes and bows and things, timed with the rest of the soldiers so that you don't stand out, something like that, and get caught. And it's a very sort of humorous and whimsical theme, easily gets stuck in my head. Following that, we have Gold Saucer, which is one of my favorite places to go to in Final Fantasy VII once you get to that point in the game. It's very much like a fairground. There are rides and concession stands and mini games and even, if I remember correctly, a battle arena where you can fight various monsters for prizes, and it's just a very memorable place in the game to go to. Following that, we have Cosmo Canyon, and this is, kind of has a Native American feel, showcasing the history of Red 13 and his people, as well as his father and his father's subsequent, sacrifice. And just a very cool drum beat and overall sound to the track. And then finishing us off for Final Fantasy VII, we have Aerith's theme. Aerith, she pretty much leads a tragic and heartbreaking life from the very beginning of the game. And this music plays directly following a scene where, that life culminates essentially, and thus makes it very, very memorable and unforgettable, if you will. And, so it has kind of, since the game was released in 1997, I think this theme has become the most popularly, referred to or used just as an overall theme for Final Fantasy VII, and it's very fitting for that. So that'll actually move us on to Final Fantasy VIII with 7 tracks I want to mention from that game. Starting us off is Liberi Fatali. And this particular track, once you put that very first disc in before you hit the start button, it's the very first opening cinematic that you see, and we see a, pretty big mark up in the production values of game music, because this is very symphonic. It has sort of a combination of, the keyboard-esque music from games prior, but it also carries with it horns and violins and things like that, and it's just a very cool way to start the game. Following that, we have Balamb Garden, and this is a place in the game, if you think of like a tropical getaway, a super deluxe hotel / mall setup, that's what the garden essentially is. It's the hub of Final Fantasy VIII, where you will spend a lot of time, and this is a very calming and soothing track. It definitely is one of my favorites, all-time favorites from Final Fantasy VIII. After that, we have The Landing, and this is actually one of the first action beats for the game, when, the crew is approaching, I think it's the island of Dolet, I don't exactly remember, but I have a very vivid memory of the actual cinematic with ships going across the water that you at first think is a starscape, and it's just very, very cool. Following that, we have what is known as an unreleased track called the Irish Jig. This is a song that is actually one of 2 that's unlockable during a certain segment of the game, where the rest of the party want to try to get protagonist Squall Leonhart and his love interest Renoa Hartley together, and either you get a 50s sort of version of the overall theme of the game, or you get the Irish Jig, and it's just a very, it shocked me originally playing the game, to have this song just suddenly be in there, and but it's very catchy and very cool. Following that, we have Lunatic Pandora, which is essentially one of the best names for a place you can go to anywhere in any Final Fantasy games, in my opinion. And this has a very otherworldly feel. If you think of music from like how they made the Doctor Who theme originally back in the 60s, or the air quotes music that they made Forbidden Planet with, it has an otherworldly sort of alien theme, and that's very fitting for what Lunatic Pandora essentially is in Final Fantasy VIII. Following that, we have the castle. This is rounding up toward the end of the game, and what can I say about this track? It just is absolutely awesome. Very intricate, and there's pipe organing going on there, and it's just really, really awesome. And then to round us off for Final Fantasy VIII, we have Eyes on Me, which is actually a vocal track, sort of the overall romantic song of the game, and kind of just has a sentimental value, so that's why I've listed it. But that'll move us on to Final Fantasy IX, with 5 that I'd like to mention. The very first song of the game, The Place I'll Return to Someday, kind of has a Scottish Highlands almost feel to it, as some of the early portion of the game does as well. Following that, we have the Jesters of the Moons. I don't remember the name of the two characters this one showcases, but essentially if the Joker was a set of twins, up to no good, it's a very kooky sort of, and again, very catchy, memorable track, and, thus I've listed it here. We also have Kuja's theme, which just ramps up that tension with the sort of piano keys, and the sound of it, think of the bad guy of the piece. And I remember there's a scene when this plays that Kuja, the, as I say, bad guy of the piece, is walking into town and people are being chased out of it because of havoc that's ensuing. And so, very memorable scene in music. Then we have Towards That Gate, which is really a charming little track at the end of the game when Princess Garnet, aka Dagger, finds out that her, love interest, the hero of the game, Zidane Tribal, is actually not dead like we all thought. And it's just a very charming little way to end the game. But that'll also bring us to Melodies of Life, which is another vocal track. This, particular one is actually the English version. There was one that was done in Japanese, but I always preferred the English because obviously I don't understand Japanese, and I always wanted to know what the lyrics were. So that'll move us on to Final Fantasy X, and in this particular case, I have one song for Final Fantasy X and then one for its sequel, X-2. To start us off for Final Fantasy X, we have To Zanarkand, which is the sort of main city that, the hero Titus comes from, and or Titus, depending on your pronunciation. When the game first came out, it was said that his name was going to be pronounced Titus, but I've also heard it Titus. So either way, this is one of the first tracks you hear at the very beginning of the game, and again, the opening cinematic, which has the entire party already assembled, and they're sitting around a campfire, and it's just a very magical and sort of melodramatic theme, and very catchy. Once again, that's one thing I will definitely repeat with all of these songs from Final Fantasy. All of these tracks are always indelibly imprinted on your memory, whether through hours of gameplay or just their overall sound. They're very memorable and very catchy, and for all the ones that I've been picking here, that's probably these are probably the best memorable ones. So the track from Final Fantasy X-2 is actually 1,000 words, and here we have another vocal track from one of my favorite parts of the game of Final Fantasy X-2, where we get a little bit of an aspect of, to give you a little idea of what the story's about. Titus from 10 ends up disappearing at the end of the game, and it's up to love interest Yuna to sort of track him down and find him, although it turns out what she's actually tracking down is a sort of ancestral memory type of thing, and there ends up being dual identities involved, and when this song occurs, it's sort of the two identities coming together, in a sense. And it's just a very cool scene when it plays out, and a very cool song. So, to round us off for this particular Final Fantasy special episode, I wanted to also include the main tracks, or two main tracks, from the Final Fantasy film adaptations. One is The Spirits Within, with the song The Dream Within, which is kind of a, again, to use the term melodramatic track, and it's just really cool. I always loved the Spirits Within film. I know it got critically panned for the most part, but I always enjoyed it. So the song is fitting for the way the movie is, even though it leaves a little to be desired with the way it ends. But some could say it's almost like an Empire Strikes Back ending, in that it's very realistic rather than just being everyone has a happy day at the end. So, but then I also chose from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, the CG sort of sequel to Final Fantasy VII, the track One Winged Angel. And this is a very highfalutin rocking track from the soundtrack. This originally goes back to the game Final Fantasy VII, and there's a version of that from that game. But this is an all-out sort of rock blast, very much akin to music by Therion. There's vocals and orchestral meshed with rock and roll and heavy metal vibes, and it's just a really cool mashup, invoking essentially the battle between Cloud Strife and his ultimate nemesis and foe, Sephiroth. And essentially that will do it for the Final Fantasy special episode, to be honest. Although I have included one bonus video, which actually is one of my own making. Back when I was originally starting out on YouTube, I created a sort of homage video called Final Fantasy Alive, and the original song that I had intended to be using for it is actually not there anymore. I had to change it because of copyright problems with YouTube, but I chose one that they selected that actually does play into the overall theme of the video. If you watch it to the very end, there's a lyric that actually says "Alive, I feel alive," and but essentially I've taken a bunch of images of my favorite characters and tried to tell kind of a story in image form of, if all the walls between the many different Final Fantasy games, which are usually self-contained worlds with their own cast of characters, if all those walls had been broken down and Sephiroth was the one true villain, and all of these heroes had to combine their efforts and come together, the main two being Cloud Strife and Squall Leonhart, my two favorite of all of them, to defeat Sephiroth, the ultimate evil of the universe. That's essentially what I was kind of trying to do with that. So, but that'll actually bring us to the end of this Final Fantasy special episode. I hope you have enjoyed what I've had to say about these tracks. I hope if you've experienced them for yourself the first time around, this will just give you a little jog down memory lane. Or if you're completely unfamiliar with them, I hope you'll check them out. And all these tracks by Nobuo Uematsu, who is a, pretty much composing genius. And I hope you'll check them all out. So I will catch you later. Peace.